All right, well, we just got done recording a video about the top elite running backs in this rookie class, and now we're going to go down, touch up on some other guys. Angela really killed that first video, so if you didn't see it, make sure you do. But we went down it was a four or five running backs.
I think it was. I think that was five.
Yeah, it was five. So make sure you go check out that other video. But here we're going to be talking about guys you can get maybe a little bit later in your rookie draft. You're not going to have to spend that top six rookie pick on them. So, man, let's just jump right into it. You can lead us off.
Awesome. I think the next I'll probably go through two or three more guys that are being talked about a little bit, and their stock's kind of rising. And the first one's Cam Akers,
Oh, yeah.
and he's a big one because people are looking at his ceiling. As am I. I think he has a high ceiling as any back in this class, and I think he has special qualities and traits that you look for in terms of how he takes contact, how he accelerates through initial contact. That's a big one with him. And he's a pretty raw receiver, but he has shown really good receiving capabilities in terms of being versatile, and translating that and correlating that to the next level. But the Florida State offensive line did him no favors,
Yeah.
no favors. And I think if he was running behind Clemson's line with Etienne, I think we'd be talking about a guy who was, he's undisputed, going to go in the first, second round. But his offensive line, his ecosystem in that regard really held him back. But I absolutely love Cam Akers. He's a big ceiling guy for me. I think that he might go a little later than people are expecting him to. I wouldn't be shocked if he went towards the latter part of the third round into the fourth round.
See,
But
that's what I'm worried about with him because I
yeah,
hear like a lot of fantasy people really high on him, and then whenever I hear about like real life NFL draft scouts for teams like they don't have high grades on him just because I mean he K Makers wasn't he like one of the like top like five rated players coming out of high school going to Florida State? Like, he was like a
yeah,
wildcat quarterback.
he was extremely highly rated coming out of high school. Um, but it's one of those. It's interesting because this is where I really like to look at how NFL evaluators are, like, where they're putting their stock. And that's a big deal, is where our NFL offense is like, okay, we need this guy. We're going to either trade up for him. We saw a lot of trade ups last year. We saw David Montgomery get traded up for. We saw Darryl Henderson get traded up for with the Rams. But it's going to be interesting to see where Cam Akers goes, because I think that he is a trade up candidate. And I think his ceiling and his talent level is going to precede his draft stock, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, that does.
Yeah, so I think that he's a guy, talent-wise, I mean, he's a first, second-round guy, probably a first-round guy. But teams have a lot of question marks, more so in pass protection. Not more so as effort in pass protection, but more so as footwork, his decisiveness. I saw a lot of that on film where, he just misses assignments sometimes, and he's a little raw, and that's okay. In this past draft class in 2019, one of the guys I was a little iffy on, but I loved his pure talent and ability, was Miles Sanders, and he got into the perfect situation under Deuce Staley as his running back coach, and obviously Doug Peterson, and then we saw Jordan Howard go down. The dominoes kind of fell. Jordan Howard went down. Alshon Jeffrey got hurt. Deshaun Jackson got hurt. Zach Ertz was banged up. They had no weapons but Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. And we saw Miles Sanders really rise to the occasion after a subpar first quarter of his rookie season. And that's the type of ascension I think that a guy like Cam Akers can have if he gets in the right situation. And he's
Yeah,
a
I mean, I
guy,
love it. You can kind of draw the parallels there too, because Miles
yeah,
Sanders, he was the number one running back coming out of high school to Penn State, and he just landed in a bad situation behind Saquon.
right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the parallels are definitely there. In terms of, like, stylistically, they're a little bit similar. I think Cam Akers has a little higher ceiling than Miles Sanders had coming out of college, just
Yeah.
because he profiles more between the tackles than Miles Sanders still does. I think Cam Akers still has some processing things and some vision things, and we're talking about like anticipatory qualities those type of things and nuances of being a running back need to be cleaned up, which is why I think NFL evaluators are not going to take him as early as we think, because he's a little bit of a project, kind of like Miles Sanders was. But then Miles Sanders had no choice but to be thrust kind of in the spotlight of being that the lead of a committee and that bell cow type back in an offense. He did really well with it. So that's the type of ceiling I think Cam Akers has in his rookie year. If he goes to the right situation, that's what's going to truly depend on for him. Is he going to go to a team like the Buffalo Bills who have a really good run blocking unit, up and coming offense, good solid quarterback play in Josh Allen, and obviously Devin Singletary's there, who had a really good rookie year, who's a rookie that I was the most impressed with in terms of running backs. I think that could be a good fit for him. He can kind of grow into a bigger role. And we can see kind of like a D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart type element going on there. That'd be fantastic. That'd be awesome to watch. But I think that would be a great situation for him. But anywhere that has a good offense already in place, I wouldn't want to see him go somewhere where he has a poor ecosystem and that one that they're still figuring out. Like Miami would not be a good spot for him. Guys like Akers and Sanders in that regard too need to go to places where a lot of pieces are already in place in terms of their offensive line, their quarterback play.
So just like Philly.
But I mean, I wouldn't scoff at an Akers-Sanders backfield combination. The fantasy world might not like that, but I think a place like Philly would be interesting. I think a place like the Chargers might be interesting too.
Oh, that would be great.
If they let go, not let go, if Melvin Gordon doesn't resign.
Yeah.
I think that'll be a really interesting one for me too, because Austin Eckler is the poster child for efficiency right now. He had a fantastic year, and I think he's a very complete running back. But
I think he's a free agent as well, is he?
He is. I think he's an RFA. I'm not positive.
Okay.
I'll have to look into it, but I think Cam Akers would be a good fit there too, because you have another back in the system that can shoulder the workload, as we saw early on in the season, with Akers potentially going there, with Eckler being there. That could be a big deal for him in terms of his learning curve. But the next back I think that's going to be interesting to talk about is Keyshawn Vaughn out of Vanderbilt. He's interesting because we saw him at Illinois early on in his career, and then he transferred to Vanderbilt. He had a ton of success at Vanderbilt. He's a pretty complete back in terms of his three-down skill set, but he doesn't really have that one quality like an Etienne, like an Edwards-Helaire, like a Jonathan Taylor that he can kind of hang his hat on. He's just good.
So is he like, does he kind of comp to like how Royce Freeman was when he came out? Just good at everything, great at nothing?
Similarly, but I think Vaughn has a higher receiving ceiling, if that makes sense. Royce Freeman profiled more, he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. He's also he's a fairly good big play threat. He can break long runs. He's just a good all-around player. But then we saw a superior player to Phillip Lindsay step into that role in that offense, and he's had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons.
Yeah.
That's not to say Royce Freeman isn't going to be good in the NFL, but he just hasn't had that lead back opportunity that Phillip Lindsay got, because Phillip Lindsay just flat out outperformed him early on both their careers. But in talking about Vaughn's an interesting guy, similar to Marlon Mack. If we're looking at what he does well, Marlon Mack's, I think, a better receiver than people think, but his receiving workload isn't being kind of looked at in Indianapolis as being a prevalent part of that offense. But I think Vaughn can be a part of an NFL offense and succeed, but the later we get with these guys, the more landing spot dependent it's going to become. So that's going to be something really interesting to look at with Vaughn is where he kind of goes.
Yeah.
And like, is he going to go somewhere to take pressure off a bigger name? like a Carolina, the Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, his stock would go down, but that's a great ecosystem to be in. That's a good offensive line. That's a great running back, and that's a great RB room in general to learn from with McCaffrey there and Rule taking over that coaching staff. Or is he going to get just plain old stuck behind somebody in Cleveland with like Nick Chubb?
Oh yeah.
So that's something where we got to look at too, because Stefanski runs primarily just a one-back system. Like Madison would come in to spell Cook sometimes when Stefanski was in Minnesota, but that was kind of, I guess, the bulk of what the bulk of the opportunity they saw. So I think that could be something where we have to take into account. Okay, he has to wait for an injury to happen. So for a guy like Vaughn, that's going to be pretty prevalent early on in his career. Is what do NFL evaluators and NFL coaching staffs, like, what do they see his role being? Now that's going to be a big part of it. The next guy, I think, who's kind of like a little lightning in a bottle is Anthony Mcfarlane. Anthony McFarlane Jr. from Maryland. He's about 5'9", 200 pounds. He's just a really explosive player. And he could have a role in the NFL offense. And he might be a guy that might be taken a smidge earlier than we think because of what NFL teams see him being as a weapon on the field. And
that's what I haven't heard much about him at all.
Yeah, he's an interesting case because I think he can do. He's just flat out electric, man. I mean, he's one of those guys that I think he's going to test well at the combine, or in his pro day, or both. And I think he's going to be someone that might be a good, either a tertiary piece or a good complement to a good NFL back already. So I think, guys, as we get later and later, these are probably guys that might be lead backs in a committee or a secondary piece in a committee at the worst. But it also depends on, like I said, man, all these depend on landing spot too.
Yeah.
Like we saw guys like Damian Harris, Darryl Henderson, Alexander Madison go in that third round range. And we're like, okay, third round draft capital. They have a chance to perform their rookie year. The most successful one out of all those guys was Alexander Madison.
Yeah.
And, I think he would have really seized that opportunity with that when Dalvin went down if he wasn't hurt as well with his ankle. But that's what we kind of don't know. I remember we were at this point in July when Darryl Henderson was going in the 5th and 6th round, like in startup drafts.
Yeah, he was going like the 4th round of FFPC redraft leagues too.
It was unbelievable. Yeah, it was unbelievable. I remember my buddy had a draft and he said he got drafted like 405, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Like the hype surrounding him was so prevalent because even I was like, Todd Gurley isn't what he used to be in terms of his ceiling. And I still agree with that. He didn't have a 1,000-yard season. He didn't perform very well in terms of – he was okay. But he wasn't what we expect from Todd Gurley, who was a league winner even like 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So that's going to be an interesting thing with where these guys go is Darryl Henderson just – he wasn't used much. They re-signed Malcolm Brown after they actually – I think they matched his
they matched it from the Lions.
With the Lions, yeah. And so – Malcolm Brown didn't see that much work. He saw a little bit early in the season. Then Henderson kind of sprinkled in there. He had a couple, games where he had a 20-yard run, and he looked good. I mean, I had him really high up my rookie ranks last year. I think I had him pre-draft as my second rookie back behind Montgomery because of just how explosive he is and his down the field skill set as a receiver. I saw him and Sanders kind of being flip-flop.
Yeah.
Except he was a little more NFL ready than Sanders was, but they just went in opposite situations. So that'll be an interesting thing. It's always a learning curve and a learning process after the season's over and looking at where you were right, where you were correct, and where you were wrong. All those are very different things. But it's going to be tough for teams that, to see where we think teams are going to evaluate talent and put them in roles. Guys like Mcfarlane, Vaughn, Akers are guys who are talented players, especially Akers, who are talented players, but there's so much unknown surrounding where they're going to go and what their role is going to be during the rookie season in the NFL.